Hi guys and welcome to Fandom Newbie. My name is Shruti and today I'm going to be talking about 10 books that you guys can read on a rainy day. But before I do that, I do want to make a couple of announcements. The first one is that last week I released an entire series on my channel called BookTube Game of Games, which included Avdut from Read Travel Become, Sonali from The Melodramatic Bookworm, and Smriti from Sant Reads. And the four of us just played some really fun games which had a bookish spin on them. And honestly, this was one of the most fun and amazing things I've done on my channel. And while a lot of you watched it, there were a lot of you that haven't watched it as yet. So I really urge you guys to check it out. I promise you guys are going to have a blast watching those videos. So if you haven't checked it out already, I'll leave a link up here as well as down in the description box. Watch the 3 videos that we made because I promise you, you will be entertained. And the second thing that I want to say is that this Saturday is our Bookbound Club's live show discussion about The Shining. So if you guys haven't started reading that book, then you still have a few more days left to pick up The Shining by Stephen King, read it so that you can participate in the Bookbound Club's live show happening this Saturday. It's either at 7 or 8 p.m. I'm not sure right now, but again, I'll leave the correct timing and all details in the description box below, so definitely check it out. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 10 books that you guys can read on a rainy day because honestly, I feel like a rainy day or the monsoon in general is the perfect reading atmosphere. I did do a video like this last year as well, so if you guys want more recommendations after watching this video, then you can check that one out. I'll leave the link up here again and in the description box. So yeah, lots of videos for you guys to check out. But with that said, let me just jump right into this one. The first book that I want to talk about is Kari by Amruta Patil. Now, this is an Indian graphic novel and it's honestly one of the most hauntingly beautiful graphic novels that I have ever read. This book basically explores the life of Kari, who is a young lesbian who's living in Mumbai in the 90s. Now, the book starts off very shockingly with Kari and her girlfriend attempting suicide, and both of them miraculously survive their suicide attempt, and immediately after that, Kari's girlfriend just basically leaves her, like they break up and she leaves to go to the US, and Kari feels extremely abandoned. And the rest of the book just explores how Kari kind of deals with her depression, deals with her loneliness, and also just deals with her life, like living with her roommates in Mumbai as well as working in the advertising industry, which is just very grueling and very taxing on her. And it just kind of explores her mental state, it explores her depression, and it explores her living with her sexuality in the 90s in Mumbai. It's so gripping, and the illustrations also are just so beautiful and haunting, and I definitely recommend this graphic novel. The next book that I want to talk about is Men Without Women by Haruki Murakami. Now, this is my first and only Murakami book that I have ever read. In fact, I did an entire vlog where I read this book, so you guys can check it out if you haven't. And I actually kind of enjoyed it. There were things which I didn't like about it, but overall, I really enjoyed the way Murakami has written this. This is basically a collection of short stories, and each story explores unconventional relationships about men who seem to have lost or have a lack of women in their life. And the way that Murakami has explored these unconventional relationships and the way he's developed the characters in such a short amount of time is what I really enjoyed about this book. What I didn't like about Murakami's writing was the over-sexualization of women, which he tends to do in a lot of these stories. That was the thing which I found a little annoying. But overall, I feel like the kinds of unconventional relationships that he's explored, the role of sex, lust, and love, and all of these aspects, and the effect that it has on relationships, those themes that he's explored in these short stories was very interesting. And yeah, if you're a Murakami fan and you haven't read this one, then you should definitely check it out. The next one that I want to recommend is The Coldest Case by James Patterson. Now, this one is an Audible original and it is only available in the audiobook format on Audible, and it was just so much fun. Firstly, the cast of this audiobook is so good. It has Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, it has Kristen Ritter from Jessica Jones, and it has Natalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones, and it also has Alexis Bledel from Gilmore Girls. And yeah, they've done just an amazing job at narrating this story. Basically, the two main characters are Bill Harney and Patty Harney, who are brother and sister. They're twins, and they are part of the Chicago Police Department, and they're basically investigating murders that are related to a kind of drug gang or like a drug ring that is running in Chicago. And they are trying to solve the murders as well as they are trying to basically break up this entire drug ring. And it's extremely fast paced, it is extremely action packed. Every single chapter ends with a kind of cliffhanger, and because it's narrated so well and these actors do such a good job in bringing these characters to life, you're just hooked throughout this audiobook and you want to know what happens next. It's also like a fully produced audiobook, so there's like background sound and noise and a lot of sound effects, so it really feels like you're listening to a TV show. And I know that a lot of people don't like that, but if you're into that kind of immersive audiobook experience and you want a very fast-paced chore police kind of thriller, then I feel like you'll really enjoy this because it will keep you at the edge of your seat. The next one that I want to talk about is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oinkan Braithwaite. Now, this book was a very, very interesting one because you go into it expecting it to be a thriller, but actually what you get is a deep character-based story about two sisters and the dynamics that they have between each other, as well as the dynamic they had with their father and what they have with their mother. It's basically like a family dynamic story with a little bit of thriller aspect thrown in, and I absolutely love that. So basically what this book is about is that the main character is Korede and her sister Ayula is a serial killer, and Korede knows that. And basically Ayula kills all of her romantic partners, or like that's what she's done, and kind of trouble brews when Ayula starts dating a man that Korede is madly in love with. And like I said, that while there is that aspect of like kind of a thriller in the background, what is really explored is the relationship between these two sisters and what depths Korede will go to protect her sister as well as protect the man she's in love with. It is just a very beautifully woven story that's extremely character focused and a very, very interesting read. So yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't. The next book that I want to talk about is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, I've spoken about this book a few times on my channel. It was one of the best books that I read last year, and honestly, I feel like it's one of my all-time favorite books. I absolutely love this book. But basically what this book is about is that it talks about a fictional band called Daisy Jones and the Six that became very famous in the US in the 1970s. And it talks about how this band kind of comes together, how they create one extremely successful album, and then the reasons which lead to this band breaking up and kind of falling apart. The thing that I really loved about this book is just the different dynamics between the band members and their different relationship dynamics that is explored by Taylor Jenkins Reid in this book. And also the different themes that affect like musicians in the rock and roll industry. So whether it's alcoholism, whether it's infidelity, or just fame kind of getting to your head, like all of these themes are explored in such a nuanced and such an amazing way in this book that it just keeps you really hooked as to what will happen to these characters. Also, the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid has kind of described the 1970s era, like how she's described everything that takes place within the music industry, whether it's meeting people from different record labels, different music producers, music directors, just like, you know, everything that was involved with the music industry in the 1970s. The way she's written that is so gripping and it's so immersive that you just feel like everything that happens in this book is real, and you'll feel like actually wanting to listen to this fictional music that doesn't exist because it just feels so real. It was one of the best reading experiences I have ever had. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly, highly recommend this book. It is so good. The next book that I want to talk about is Raptor Rising by Anjali Joshi. Now, this book is just so gripping and it has such a unique premise. It basically follows a female serial killer who likes to kill extremely famous personalities, film them, and then upload them on the dark web for money. And she has been getting away with it until like this really swanky cop comes in whose name is Vikram, who then hunts her and is trying to track her down. It's basically talks about like the investigation that Vikram does to try to catch her, as well as the games that she plays with Vikram's team. And the most interesting thing that I found about this book is, firstly, you don't really see a lot of women serial killers in pop culture, or just, you know, in a lot of true crime shows. So to have a woman be like that ruthless and that twisted was just very interesting to read about. Like, I don't know what it was about her character especially, that made it extremely interesting, and to kind of go back and see what it was that resulted her in becoming this way, and the motivations that she has in killing these men, and why she does it, and just everything about her psyche was very, very interesting to read about, as well as the entire investigation process was like extremely gripping, and it makes you want to read the book further and further, and you want to know what happens next because of that. So yeah, it was just a very unique plot in that sense, and I quite enjoyed reading it. So check it out if you haven't. The next book that I want to talk about is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Now, this is just one of those extremely atmospheric, amazing books that transports you into a different world that you just want to live in. And I feel like that's the perfect kind of book to read on a rainy day. Now, what this book is about is that it follows our main character, Zachary, who is a college student. And one day when he's at the library, he stumbles upon a book that he finds very intriguing, and he starts reading it, and he discovers that one of the stories in the book is actually about him. It's actually about something that happened to him in the past, and he's very intrigued about how someone knew such like an intricate detail about his life. And the more he investigates about this book, the more it kind of leads him down a path of like secret societies, like masquerade balls, and it ultimately leads him to this extremely magical, mystical library that is there under the surface of the earth. And it leads him to figure out about the people who are protecting this library, and the people who are protecting the stories that this library contains. And it also leads him to discover how his life and his destiny is kind of intertwined with this mystical, magical library that exists. And if the plot sounds weird to you, it is. This book is extremely weird, and sometimes it's very, very confusing to read. But overall, what this book is that it's basically Erin Morgenstern's homage to stories and to readers. It really talks about the power of stories and why stories need to be protected at all costs, and how important stories can be for readers as well as just for people in general, and the impact that stories can have on their life. And it's written in a very lyrical, very atmospheric way that I accept is not for everyone. A lot of people might just find this book very boring and like useless, but if you're into very lyrical, very poetic, very atmospheric kind of writing that can be confusing at times, but it transports you into a different world, then definitely check this book out. It was so good. The next book that I want to talk about is The Shining by Stephen King. Now, this, of course, I read for the Bookbound Club live discussion that's happening this Saturday. Another reminder for you guys. But basically, this was my second Stephen King book that I've read. I've read Pet Sematary. I've watched it, the movie, and now I've read The Shining. And so in my entire experience with like Stephen King material, what I've realized is that he doesn't really write horror per se. Like, he doesn't write boo kind of ghost stories. What he writes are psychological thrillers that really explore different aspects of human emotion and human behavior, and he elevates those things of like human behavior and human emotions with horror. And that's what I really loved about The Shining as well, because on the surface it seems like it's a ghost story, because what this book is about is that our main character, Jack Torrance, basically is entrusted with this hotel and like taking care of this hotel as it shuts down for the winter. And he moves to the hotel with his wife and son, and as it happens, this hotel is haunted by some menacing spirits and almost like demonic entities that start messing with the family. So at the surface, it's kind of like a haunted house, haunted hotel kind of story. But if you dig deeper, what Stephen King actually has explored through through these like horror supernatural elements is the effect of alcoholism as well as domestic abuse and the effect that this has on a family. And these two things are just kind of elevated because of the supernatural elements and the psychological effects that these supernatural elements have on the characters. And it's just so interesting because it's not a typical horror book, and I loved that. I loved that it was not a typical horror book. Yes, there are ghosts, yes, there are supernatural things, and it can get scary at times, but it's not just a demon that is chasing the family. The demons are kind of within the family members, and that's the most interesting kind of story. Plus, Stephen King's character development is just so good. The way he writes his characters is just absolutely amazing, and I loved The Shining because of that. And we're definitely going to be talking about some really interesting things on Saturday about this book. So again, read the book and join us for our live show discussion. The next book that I want to talk about is Attachments by Rainbow Rowell, and this is such a cute love story. So there are three characters in this book. The first two are Beth and Jennifer, who are really close friends, and they work in the same office. So they're office colleagues, but they're also very close friends. And basically they discuss every aspect of their personal life through their emails. So they kind of like correspond to each other through their office emails, and they're just talking about what's happening in their personal lives. And then we have the character of Lincoln, whose job it is to basically monitor people's emails to make sure that they're not talking about inappropriate things or like, you know, any inappropriate stuff that's happening in the office. It's his job to catch that. And he basically has to read everyone's emails, which is a huge invasion of privacy. But he reads Beth and Jennifer's emails, and he finds himself like being extremely entertained, but also falling in love with Beth through her interactions with Jennifer. And it then follows kind of like the love story between Lincoln and Beth, and like, you know, will they, won't they kind of get together. And again, it's a very, very sweetly written story. It is just so much fun to read, and I love Rainbow Rowell's writing. I've only read Attachments and Landline by her. I haven't read Fangirl, but her writing style is just really easy to read, and yeah, it's just a really fun, easy breezy book. So if you're into love stories and you want something that's cute and entertaining, then check out Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. And the last book that I want to talk about is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Now, this book is kind of like a thriller, but it also tackles a whole bunch of other interesting subjects as well. But basically, this book follows an unnamed protagonist who falls in love with a man who is 20 years older than her, who is a widower, who had an ex-wife named Rebecca, but who is also like, he belongs to a section of society that is much more elaborate and rich as compared to the section of society that she comes from. And then after she gets married to him, they move to his ridiculously crazy rich estate, which is called Manderley. And this protagonist basically has to come to terms with adjusting to this rich and lavish lifestyle. She has to find, like, you know, her place where she belongs in this world, which she just doesn't seem to understand, all with having the presence of his ex-wife just like looming over her constantly and just always haunting her. So really, like, the core of this book is basically the protagonist's struggle of identity and finding her place and finding where she belongs in this crazy rich lifestyle, as well as where she belongs with her husband, because she's always haunted by his past, and it's just her discovering her footing. And like I said, there is a thriller mystery aspect attached to this book, which lends a very like creepy vibe, but overall it's the journey of this protagonist finding her identity, and it is just so beautifully written, very, very atmospheric, very creepy as well, and it's just perfect to read on like a stormy night when it's raining outside. It's just so good. So yeah, highly recommend this book as well. So yeah, those were my recommendations. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you found some good books that you guys can read. If you did, give this video a big fat thumbs up. Leave a comment down below letting me know some of your recommendations of what you like to read on a stormy, rainy day. And of course, do subscribe to my channel for more book related videos. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.